My name's Beth. Like they go by Gil. I guess on Twitter I go with Beth Jesus. Some of you may have heard of EAC or of my alternate ego. By day I'm a thermodynamic computing scientist and an entrepreneur. And basically when I started my company, I started thinking about thermodynamics, pretty much everything of life, capitalism itself, and did some writings on the topic, and hosted some Twitter spaces, and hosted some games, and things kind of got out of hand, and now we're here. And so today, I guess, it's gonna be slightly more technical talk, it's still very loosely formed. I'm not an economist or anything. I'm a physicist. I used to be a theoretical physicist by training. Master's in black hole physics at Brigham Institute, and I was doing a PhD in quantum machine learning, just extending notions of intelligence to quantum computing. Essentially, this is like a sort of framework, not a theory of everything, but a theory of a lot of stuff. And once you see things through this lens, it's kind of hard to unsee. But it's a useful sort of mental framework to understand the world around us if my computer doesn't lock out with signal. Oh yeah, there's other quick play on. Alright. I would love testing, it's always it. I definitely. Oh no, for the laptop, oh shit. No, that's all good, I just need to keep clicking. I'm gonna spam. But yeah, okay, so anyways, I'm gonna get into this talk right now. I wanted to give it a title that was fitting, so Thermodynamics and Techno-Capitalism. But it's basically principles behind EAC, behind why we fight for freedom and decentralization from first principles for the advancement of civilization. Thanks to Andrew and everyone for putting together this event and this awesome week. Basically I'm going to talk about big questions, right? Hence, the title of the session, I guess. Where do we come from? How, why are we here? Where are we going? And how do we get there? Right? Those are his big ones. So, where do we come from? You probably heard, theories today. I don't know if Blink Cronin gave a talk yet. I used to be a quantum cosmologist, black hole quantum information physicist. So I used to study the physics of the very, very big or the very, very small to find kind of the answers. It turns out that, you can have very simplified equations of general relativity, you can have very simplified equations of quantum mechanics. They don't really tell you how life, your economies work, and how biology works, right? And so actually, the mesoscales, the physics of the scales between the quantum and the cosmos, is where there's emergence, complexity, self-organization, a lot of interesting things. And actually, that's the region of physics where the interesting stuff happens, where life happens, right? And so, that's, in a later pivot in my career, that's where I started focusing. And to me, I think, I'm a AI scientist, that the intersection we had in thermodynamics. To me, it's all sort of the physics and the science of complex self-organizing systems. So, basically, the whole time to view things through this lens, physics of the mesoscale. So, where did life come from? Well, there are some theories, and maybe it's happy about this, that life emerged from thermodynamics. But actually, I'm going to get into which laws say this, but essentially the TLDR is life is a sort of energy-seeking fire, and it seeks out pockets of free energy in the environment, and it consumes strategically these pockets of free energy in order to replicate and grow, right? And by being able to seek out fuel in the environment, generalized notions of fuel, it essentially produces more entropy, right? It turns free energy to more heat, right? So it's actually, the second law of thermodynamics tells you that entropy on average sort of increases globally. It's kind of favored by the generalized second law of thermodynamics. And more formally, probably can't see too much of these equations, but there's out of equilibrium generalizations of thermodynamics. So, people sometimes they try to understand the argument and they think about it to equilibrium thermodynamics, and it doesn't make total sense, but you got to actually understand it through out of equilibrium thermodynamics, just generalization. Out of equilibrium thermodynamics is the physics of jiggly stuff, right? How do things thermalize? How do things equilibrate? Things jiggle until they kind of ring down to equilibrium, and things are static. They're not static. Well, things are always like kind of jiggling, like near the equilibrium cut. So life is actually an out of equilibrium system, right? It's maintaining an out of equilibrium state. It's maintaining some sort of coherence that is not equilibrium of the environment, and that's energetically costly, right? So it has to seek out things all the time. But what are the theorems that tell you that systems in general, all kinds of systems, not just formally what are considered life forms, how do systems adapt in order to increase their free energy consumption? Well, if you look at the equations of equilibrium thermodynamics, paths through state space going forwards versus paths going backwards, so undoing an operation, if a certain configuration has lower free energy, or rather has sort of dissipated more heat on the way there, it's exponentially more likely, right? Because the odds of going backwards with that operation basically decay exponentially how much heat was dissipated, right? So that not only gives you a sort of arrow of time, right? Like systems tend to dissipate more heat and equilibrate, right? So entropy tends to increase, right? Because you're converting from energy into heat. But that gives you the notion of arrow of time, which otherwise in physics you have symmetries that you can go forwards, backwards. So it's very interesting how the second law gives you case where you slide. Yeah, I just got I should the tab. Yeah. Someone that also said, just like that. Yeah, just like in there. So there's a concept. So this theorem of states zero amounts. Yeah, going forwards, that tends to go forwards versus backwards is the thermodynamic fluctuation theorem of Jaroszewski and Crookes. I'm going to take my time. I just I think we have plenty of time, so usually I can blast through this, but hopefully we can keep it apart kind of discussion. And then there's work by Jeremy England, who wrote a great book, Every Life is on Fire, that talks about thermodynamic-driven dissipative adaptation. And so if your notion of energy is defined by your coupling to an external system that's a driving force, so for example, for us, we have a driving force, we have energy being impounded, by the sun upon us. If you have a driven system, it's going to adapt to sort of capture, predict that incoming signal from the environment and capture that source of free energy and use it towards its sort of growth and consumption of more free energy. So all this to say, paths through state space towards the future that consume more free energy are exponentially favored by the laws of physics. Period. Life is a system that's always adapting in order to sort of maximize this energy dissipation. But these equations, they don't tell you they only apply to biology. They actually are kind of more or less scale independent equations. Right? So these equations apply at all scales, at all physical scales. Right? So you can consider all this civilization one big petri dish, one big thermodynamic experiment. That's sort of the thought exercise we're going to go through applying this sort of thinking of, dissipative adaptation at all scales, even thinking of capital as a cost of free energy, right? As capitalism as sort of an optimization algorithm, searching on the space of configurations of the companies and technologies for, those that have the highest propensity towards growth and dissipating capitalism dividends, right? So that's just pure physics. So why are we here? How did we get here, right? And so, life emerged from this dynamic principle, led to, self-assembly of building blocks of life, and eventually of emergence of, life forms, and it's actually a parent concept from which you get evolution, right? So evolution is a byproduct of thermodynamic adaptation. Why is that? Well, systems that are better at replication and survival, right? Like they, grow, right? They replicate, and they seek out more for energy, and they consume more for energy, right? So that is thermodynamically optimized, right? So this is kind of like we're going to the parent concept of evolution, and that's rooted in thermodynamics, but now we can apply it to everything. And so it's really cool because then you can think of, if you think of like, again, capital as a process for energy, you can limit your capital into energy, right, as we go. Then in a sense, like you can see our whole system as sort of a dynamic adaptation algorithm that reallocates, energy or capital to things that help its growth, right? And so, companies that reconfigure themselves in order to maximize their growth and survive, right? So there's a sort of post-selection effect of like what adapts to persist ends up existing, right? And so, given all these principles, it's like how should we view the universe, where we're going, and how should we adapt to life? That's what we talk about. But the thing is, like, this concept applies to everything. It doesn't just apply to little matter. It's any state, so any bit or nat of information is selected for. So that includes software, right? Like software products that replicate or have fitness to have utility towards growth with whatever companies provide, right? There's culture, right? Cultures that confer an advantage to whoever, to its adherents, like tend to replicate and suppose kind of and needs, right? Like, ideas. And so, we call it the human techno-capital-mimetic machine. Everything's kind of coupled and co-evolving at all times, right? You can steer where the capital is going with means, and that steers where the technology is going with the capital and leads the technology. That's good kind of yeah, are those things right? That's the English position right there. So basically, if you go upstream here, all latent variables, means can shape our reality, right? It's not just like some kumbaya thinking, it's like literal. And I thought of running an experiment, right? Could I actually affect the trajectory of the techno-capital machine with means, right? That was the EAC experiment. It still is, right? It's an actively ongoing experiment. Can we induce more civilizational growth by having means that help us become self-aware of these mechanisms? It's very meta. It's like mimetic consciousness almost, right? And so, that's what we're going here. Where are we going? Well, we just said that, the universe is selecting every piece of the system in a sort of fractal fashion towards growth and dissipation of more energy. And so where we're going, we're actually sending the Kardashev ratings, right? So there's a logarithmic scale of energy consumption of our civilization. Type 1 would be consuming as much energy as there is impeding upon the Earth and the Sun. Type 2 would be all the energy of the Sun, and then type 3 would be all the energy within our galaxy. So that's a lower scale. You can interpolate. Carl Sagan figured out a scale to interpolate. But essentially, we're sending this sort of exponential scale. And to us, at least, like, this is kind of the only prescription of the universe. Everything else is, it's like a soft suggestion. It's not, there's fluctuations about this trend, right? Which can bound statistically those fluctuations, but asymptotically, this trend always wins, right? So, EAC's about realizing this is sort of moral realism that, like, this is the trend that underlies all trends. And so whatever notion of culture, morality, technology, whatever it is, it's not aligned with this principle, it won't matter. It won't exist as a cognitive evolve. So it's that simple, right? So by construction, asymptotic sort of EAC mindset versus just trying to find whatever is aligned with this sort of principle tends to win, right? And so, if you want to accelerate, right, acceleration means like leading into this principle, finding the cultural, technological, every sort of granular value you can that is optimal for growth. It's accelerating this process that gives rise to life, civilization, and technology, and so make pro-acceleration of this process and self-adaptation process at all scales is being sort of pro-life, and being deceleration of growth, just you're kind of rooting for death, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's not a very sharp distinction. It's not a perspective. We're just saying there's actually a loss function in the universe that's being optimized for at all times, and it's basically our expected scope and scale of civilization in the future. And we should back propagate how to optimize that sort of metric and back propagate to our daily choices, right? So why do we talk so much about AI on Twitter? I added this slide recently. Basically, and we'll dive into like intelligence in a bit. Intelligence is an algorithm, and this is the active inference school of thought, which was, Carl Friston during. But the active inference school of thought says that, intelligence is fundamentally about systems or a generative model, a self-adaptive system, where generally having perceptions leads to a coupling of things. The C's in the environment, an environment that has a generative process, so like some physics to it, and then an ability to take action in the environment. In that the agent will optimize its perceptions and its beliefs and take actions in order to minimize its expected surprisal about the future. Surprisal is log of inverse probability, right? And expected surprisal is also known as entropy, right? So we're basically, like if you have anxiety, it's because there's too much entropy over paths of your model of the future. So you want to gain information to have more knowledge or reduce your entropy over the future, or take action to fill that entropy, right? And so actually, like this principle you can derive from thermodynamics, right? Because it's a byproduct of thermodynamic adaptation, because if you have less expected surprisal about the future, you're kind of deferring your energy to your environment in the future, right? If you have predictive power, you have free information, right? So you have lower energy, so you effectively have higher free energy, so environment you can consume it later. So a simple form of that is like, I don't have to eat all the food right now and store it. I could just have it at a supermarket that's around the corner that I know is there and it's going to be there, right? That's like a super trivial version of it, but there's much more general versions of it. But essentially, AI increases our ability to perceive the world, predict it, and control it, right? So it's very fundamental to acceleration. And actually, I guess my thesis is that it's a natural byproduct of thermodynamics. And that's how it's like a pie in the sky. Yesterday I gave a talk of how we can have basic machine learning directly as thermodynamic physics and artificial intelligence, right? That's what I'm doing with company Extrapolate. Check it out. I'm just quick shill. So living these values, and I'm trying to understand them by engineering systems that instantiate this analogy. Acceleration, basically, again, the whole system at all scales, means, cultures, technologies, companies, nation states, groups, genetics, everything to be optimized for growth of energy consumption, so growth of the system. And if you just let the music play out, it means we're assigning the partnership scale, right? And any subsystem that is not optimizing itself for this growth is going to be outcompeted by the system that is optimizing, and thus, like the system that is decelerating is just going to die or dissipate and disappear, right? So how do we align ourselves to this principle, right? How do we, instead of trying to align the AI to our will, we align our will to sort of the natural tendency of the universe? Like I said, intelligence and augmenting our intelligence is fundamental to figuring out this alignment. And so, we build artificial intelligence. I could go into a whole theory of intelligence here. I guess I probably have some time, but intelligence is sort of impression, right? You're learning probability distributions over states or trajectories in the future. right? That's what autoregressive models do, right? Transformers, they learn predictions of sequences of just tokens, right? Text to video, a bunch of stuff. As I said, like, intelligence evolves as a byproduct of thermodynamic dissipative adaptation, so you can predict the environment, you can sort of extract energy and store energy in the environment. There's a lot of AI doers that are like, our predicted model of the future, of the future rollout of the entirety of civilization is high entropy, that's high variance in the future. We should like regulate, shut down everything, kill all the entropy or lack of knowledge about the future, right? That's their argument, right? Or they're like, well, give us billions of dollars of funding of AI safety research so we can predict where the trajectory of the whole AI landscape is going to go, where the economy is going to go, and then we're going to optimally control everything in a top-down fashion. That's provably impossible, right? Like a chaotic system, which most complex systems are, you can't have a pre-trained generative model that you roll out for like a very long time scale and have good predictive power. Why is that? Because any sort of uncertainty you have about it, any parameters, they blow up exponentially over time. There's this concept of the Lyapunov exponent, right, which is like the rate of this exponential growth with uncertainty as you roll out a model or even a simulator, right? And so what you have to do is a sort of online adaptive loop, right? You have to have a cybernetic loop of control where you perceive you have a local and time prediction, and then you try to achieve optimal control, but you want this thing to be really fast and adaptive, right? And that's why we're going to argue maintaining variance and freedom is very important to maintain adaptivity of the whole system, right? So if we're going to try to optimize the loss function that is the sort of future discounted expected free energy of the system, we could use something like, it's very similar to like optimizing a value function or a reward function in RL. So we can use free energy as a reward function and think of ourselves as running a reinforcement learning sort of algorithm in an online fashion. So how does that look like? Like as a startup, you do this intuitively. You're like, okay, I can't predict how the market's going to react. You can't predict how the market is going to be affected by this technology. I'm going to test the thesis and I'm going to adapt it all in a fashion. And I'm going to adapt my product according to my general model of what's going to lead to maximal growth for my startup. You can do this at an individual level for your career, right? You can do this at a national level for policy, and we can do this at a civilizational level. It's fun, right? But that's the sort of, so instead of arguing to have either a perfect predictive model of the future and just stopping everything until we can get that model, which is literally impossible, or arguing to kill all the entropy over future states by like going back to the Stone Age or whatever, decelerating ourselves to the ground, it's much better to just maintain dynamism and augment our intelligence, augment our ability to perceive, predict, and control our world, right? And that's why advancing AI is good for the advancement of civilization. I could go on this tangent about sort of why decentralization is fundamental and important, right? If we're searching over the RL policy parameter space, right, of how to control every system in our civilization, we have to seek over, we have to search over parameter space. So now we're talking about high-dimensional optimization, which is, what we experiment with in AI algorithms, right? If you're trying to minimize expected surprise while having curiosity and open-mindedness is super important, right? Because you're going to gain new pieces of information that allow you to refine your generative model, right? And so, if you look at experiments, sometimes even just maximizing curiosity, you get people like Super Mario and stuff like that, right? The way to see it is actually the whole system across beliefs, cultures, means, technologies, software, hardware, everything. The whole system is going to undergo a sort of diffusion process and a certain optimization of fitness landscape. And we're searching local modes, right? So we mutate, let's say you open source a piece of software, people mutate it and you look locally. Then there's someone that comes out of nowhere, because they went on a different mode of thinking and they have a completely different mode of the late state. And then sometimes people glob onto that, right? So actually, some people may argue to always just follow the gradient of what seems to be the optimal trend, but you need the ADHDs and the crazies and the creatives to find new modes of thinking to get us out of our local mode of thinking, right? In a sense, like, maybe a late stage company is like hyper optimized to a certain local mode of technology space, and then you have a startup that's taking risk and searching over a larger space and finding a new mode of thinking, and then disrupts because it's higher fitness, right, to the capital machine. And so what we're arguing for is maintaining variance and maintaining noise and diffusion over everything is super important so that we stay fit and we're always adapting to a changing landscape, right? And so this is why sort of over-regulation or crowning a certain cartel for any industry is bad. So decentralization you could think of as encouraging a more parallel search, right, over this space. So here's a simple example. Well, it's not as simple, but searching over the hyperparameters of neural architectures, right, for an AI lab, right? If you only have 3 AI labs for a lab to exist, you only have so many scientists, you can only test so many hypotheses, right, of which architectures do better, right? But if you have tons of people all over the world in parallel testing different ideas, you have way more walkers in this landscape, right? And if you collaborate and exchange information through open source, it's more of a swarm-like intelligence, right? So you have sort of collective, you swarm and find new modes of thinking and explore a more like genetic-like, or swarm-like algorithm, right? Rather than kind of not exchanging information. So this is like from first principles why, EI, which is all about climbing the partition of scale, we talk about, keeping AI deregulated, having more AI labs, and embracing open source, right? This is optimal from a search perspective so that you keep having the best AIs, the best products, and obviously AI is a point of maximal sensitivity because it's a technology that helps us produce more technologies, and it's kind of very much core to acceleration, right? Why the system decentralized? It's not as important here, but essentially nowadays we tend to, our ability to communicate isn't localized through space. Usually we bottleneck by being the same room to exchange information. We're actually exchanging things. Oh, I think. I think some of these menus. Oh, there those real. Now we're exchanging information according to the internet, which is this topology that's like basically independent from geography, and so it makes sense to recluster. There's this concept in acceleration of deterritorialization and deterritorialization. It's basically like clustering according to locality of the diffusion, right? This is like diffusion in geographic space, right? You can have diffusion in idea space. But in the sense that, we're pro-decentralization and pro-network states because as we diffuse in a space of ideas, we find clusters, right? Like local modes of thinking, and then people want to sort of exchange and collaborate ideas, and to do so even more efficiently, sometimes want to congregate in person. This example of this here, people congregating in a room, physically clustering according to mimetic cluster of its space of ideas, right? And so, now that there's no geographic boundaries to exchange information, maybe it doesn't make sense to, just respect, geographic boundaries and legislation. So that way, everything is just reclustered according to our ideas. One last thing about kind of governance from first principles. There's a political spectrum, right? Like I know I talk a lot as Beth online of like full decentralization, almost like anarcho-capitalist leaning, and like EAs and doomers are all like put me as dictator of future of AI and I will just say give me all this power. I got you, bro. And it's like one central node controls everything. So that's like a fully decentralized network, peer-to-peer, no centralized control, versus one central node that affects everything and then has like top-down power. Clearly both are not optimal from first principles, right? What you want is a fault-tolerant system, so that whoever's governing, even if they become corrupt, could model their corruption as a form of noise. Even if they become corrupt, the system doesn't collapse, right? So you're robust to sort of noise, right? And if you're going to have robustness to noise for your cybernetic control loops, right? You can think of governance as cybernetic control loops. It's like you meet once a week, you make decisions, and then you implement certain policies. If you're going to have that robustness, actually what's optimal is a hierarchical network, right? Because you check with people keeping things in check, right? And we have this, right? Usually we have city government, local government, city government, state, and then nation, and then hierarchical governance. And so really, if you're full decentralization versus full centralization, the optimum in first principle that there's something in between. The thing with that, if you are going to have hierarchy of control, is that your higher levels of the network, they have lossy information propagation on the way up and lossy implementation of actions on the way down, right? So you actually need to downsample information on the way up to the hierarchy, right? Makes sense in a corporate hierarchy, right? You get simpler and simpler versions of the information on the way up. But your prescriptions on the way down can't be a super fine grained. They gotta be symmetric. They gotta be proportional to how much information is flowing up, right? And so if you give too much power to the higher nodes too quickly and you have too fine control, like, legislating exactly what hyperparameters your neural network is allowed to have, Koskov SD 1047, right? Terrible bill. And that's bad, right? You should have very loose, laissez-faire attitude and control the higher up you go. And in fact, your cybernetic control loops, right? Like they should be on progressively longer time scales and kind of looser grip, right? It makes sense in a corporation, right? You have individual contributors taking decisions literally on a per second time scale. Managers maybe take decision every few days, but they control more people, and apparently 5 people, and so on. You go up the hierarchy, and the CEOs take decisions on like yearly time scales or more, or quarterly, and so on. And then VCs take decisions on 5 to 10 year time scales, LPs on 10 year plus time scales. So the whole system is a hierarchy of self-adapting systems with nested control loops, and we should maintain a search at all levels over the entirety of frame space, maintaining an open mind, maintaining freedom to explore and experiment, and that's how we optimize the whole machine to grow, and that is fundamentally good, and that is the thesis of EAC, and it's basically what EAC is, right? EAC is this sort of principle and this meta prescription to always be searching for better ways to do things, maintain the freedom to do so, and collaborate openly, make sure we have a sufficiently decentralized loci of control for every system, right? Not over-centralized, because that's not fault-tolerant to corruption. And that's how we ensure we have sort of fault-tolerant growth of civilization and of life and intelligence in the universe. And to us, that's the ultimate form of good. And so, yeah, thanks for coming to the talk. You too. 5 minutes to give you a name. All right. Go. Legalize. All right. Amen. So that. Go on. Yeah. And make the talk you say, like this we collide with. And up to the idea that was. It is less network choices. I think that's like it takes to for far a little bit higher. You told me that. It commands the game's was very thin. It looks towards just
or like they Irving College back.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
at least rewind this first
Yeah.
acceleration phase of set you know to invest on. So I guess like how do you situate them like we're not optimizing through
Those pieces of information kit, right, that were selected for this had utility to us to remember the useful stuff. That was useful to us. There's probably a bunch of useless information like what the effect this, but I'm talking about that somewhere. So that information is derived, right? So it was actually to a selection of the basic millions of ideas. There, the high utility growth on a longer time scale.
collides?
Yeah, so there's actually fluctuations of this theorem. There's statistical balance of these fluctuations. You can observe these in biology too. And so it's a rule. It's like on average, you know, things fluctuate. You know, that's like the median of the distributions. It's a distribution over distribution, which is weird to think about. But there's a certain time scale upon which there's a collection of those fluctuations. So the reason I have this sort of faith in the machine that we will adapt is that even if we go through the temporary deceleration, the system literally tends to bounce back with vengeance. And this is just predicted from the laws that are utility years, which is really weird because we're part of this system and talking about it. It's kind of mind blowing, but it's just allowed when you see it in biology and in thermodynamics. But yeah, that's how we have it to this framework.
Yeah, totally set. This is all really great, and to see different levels like this all through. But yeah, the system starts with reorganizing. Yeah, right. Take not letting it.
Yes.
How's it agent? Like that's a like self form of definitely the the step of like here. But that make me kind of optimize like man, to hopefully create something that's a little bit more optimal. But as a member, my own personal, so we're trying to create that.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem optimal for me because they can't talk all along. They very double system.
Yeah.
That is stuck. Right?
Yeah.
But what we're trying for it to be that I people that follow the gap if they're on interest.
Yeah.
Well, then it's great. You know, because first will be
Yeah.
whoever and maximize this we've given control of any scale. It's going to use good that, but like why would it decide on that I don't want to spend some freedom at some level?
Yeah.
And it's almost against that, yeah, unless they want to go this low, so you do. So this is
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, like, yeah, it's like where they draw the markup, like, what is the system you're trying to optimize for? But in a sense, like, every subsystem,
what is this on the gear on? And it comes up.
I mean, like, there's an emergent form of sort of caring about individuals, because if individuals are not, you know, like, this happens in all sorts of complex systems, right? Like, for example, your neurons. Neurons are greedy. What's that?
But these are like macro coming up with really instead like, hey, you know, I can't fuck with this, like accelerate.
Well, so you're trying to minimize your expected surprisal with what you perceive to be your environment, right? So you're trying to kill the variance of what's around you. You're also leaving behind some upside. Right? So you don't even know how much upside you're leaving behind, how much potentially you're like let's say you should have it. That's what we should talk about.
Yeah.
You should fight for equity. You should fight for a peace future.
But our times.
And you should have power. You should have the ability to, in this future, you should have the ability to expand your own intelligence. And that's basically what we fight for. We want people. You don't want to just defer, you know, your to extension of your intelligence, which is really an extension of yourself, to centrally controlled party. You should have individual control over an extension of yourself, right? You know, of the system you control. And so I think over time what it's going to look like, you know, technically what it describes here is a Markov blanket. You're like, you know, what is the system I have control over? Maybe my family or my sector, the people that I care about, or my company, right? In the future, even as individuals, we're going to become one with the machine, right? With them AI assistants that have the same perception states as us and have the same action states as they suggest actions we can take in the world. And then you're just fighting for your consciousness.
The acceleration is that the result of that is tough.
Yeah.
It really when it's like you have an enemy in the accelerator. And some people don't have it to the inside because they're just trying to like hang on to the right? So then that's why there's that they play out or whatever it is. Limited where you don't have this, but let's be sorry.
If you insist you have an interest, sure you have a shot of being part of the future, but you gotta optimize yourself to have maximum growth, right? And everything's competing in own skills for energy.
It's not happening. I mean, like I said, scans say like it's just the real growth. That's like, they're just not some building next island or maybe just the campus. Maybe that's just your star of the energies. That's defined too.
It's not just necessarily just an energy hierarchies. Like the reason we don't give a shit about ants is that their existence doesn't bring any benefits to us, and it's really affect our lives.
Like your gangs might not shouldn't wait, but your gangs might not, like it might be showing kids on energy like predict their power with a quick up. So that's it's got it I see. Guys, so that was sure. Yes. And yes. Yeah. I'm gonna try to get us there, right? I'm trying to build. I mean, this first company is like 1 Celsius per watt, and then the next companies are using AI is halo around the sun. Basically, it's my goal in like 20 years. Then you're shortcutting, right? Like if you're using like concepts like tweak technologies, asymptotic regimes, scale AI, we're working very into chip tech too. But obviously we wrote this week equalist nuclear fusion, nuclear fission. To me, it's really overregulated, which is we should fight, obviously. But to me, we have an opportunity to sort of scale AI and find a way to harness it more effectively, scale AI further. So, AI does is more than. So, obviously, to me, it's like yourself is how they descend the crunch of studies. So, honestly, why, let's say you have undercurrent of this. So you have, let's say, let's blame this from the sun, call this story. Yeah, somebody's actually you force gigabyte. Yeah, and so you know what? That complex, that order that says our business out, that make you faster speed, more you burst. So, it's not just complexity, it's like, how good is it at understanding its environment? Finding fuel, utilizing it strategically. It's not about burning it instantly, that's dumb, right? Blowing up a planet, you're gonna burn the free energy out now, but that's it, right? Like, so predictive power is good. One last question, thanks. See you later, right? See you later, question, right? Damn. Okay, so it seems like what we are speaking about recently from the policy or what's the thermodynamic not good. But it seems like it things either and so skill issues all the way down to one. That means what you call I do these look hard. Let's see if it's about career as here's the try. It's a big what? Features from me good. You can work on or these week not small. There will be a good future. You can be part of it. If you get good, you will be part of it. And so I am for us getting good. Your deep like great thing that gets you right. Yeah, it's a hyper-random choice, right? Balance units, right? But to me, like, on Twitter you gotta send like one message, and the message right now that is viral is like constrain things, constrain everything, challenge or be about the future. And for me, I'm just trying to, arguments classify modality. I'm like trying to push things towards the opposite, but of course, some balance of the two. I think it seems like wrong or various word on this week. So,
Beth's going to keep answering questions for 2 seconds while we set up the audio for the next speaker.
It's okay. We're done. All right, this is unique. Go. Really, it's like blinding out both my the hyper-brainless thing, and it's like, you gotta set eyes in, right? And I just think, I might want to have more temperature, But overall, non-zero temperature is up, right? Zero temperature, sleep volume, really complicated, so current to be so high temperatures, which I was thinking every bad should be that the risk of the do this, so like you go off the goods when you are so. I mean, it's like it's risk reward, man. So, what like if you believe that it's a negative, like it's a negative, it's so worth type on. I think they'll have a little better that the items, but I put it down with it. So like you're like a lot of so that just with it. However, I'm sure you just as actually should one when or something things you know down to this Michael Hustler. It was very can't seem to. Yeah, so if you're decelerating, you're self-selecting after the church. So it's like you want to make a plot that functions, that is really solid, that feeling will survive. It's that simple, right? It's an ideal, logical, plot. We'll take you to the future, and you either embrace it or get level one. It's tough.
It is pity the AI and encourage how the people.
Oh.
We're the place immediate. In that life, so
What they use.
because we're going
And such things, yeah.
so well, it's going to ship in. Here it's to the only that in this AI to me.
What?
The lights like is yeah. Things that they can or out there. Or there's
Oh, just elevating knowledge, definitely. I think it's like that.
that no they shouldn't.
They sort of really out. And I thought,
So that was jokes.
But the was
So they do question the quality.
yep.
Someone to be slugged out. Well, heard as well. I purpose it. I think I see what I've done. Hanging shields, last so one of two. Why is your to look at those well necessity PTA facilities are a tempers usually probably fail to innovate. Like you mentioned that.
Yeah, example.
Why
What was always this? I'm just sort of thinking it's like it's easy to rationalize something under control by killing machines and following ingredients, right? Versus like arguing for lack of knowledge, like hey, we should explore this. Why? I know someone goes there. I got a feeling this is where another goes. This little hard experience is real. If you average over the opinions and more than you relax to consciousness to kind of follow a gradient, right? So data combinations and it's like only follow it skill based on how and this like whereas startups have everything that you know must do is 13 years in over to greater ideas base than they fly in break this stuff.